Hi, I'm Marcus with the IndieMusicLab.com. So of course there are a plethora of ways to go about mixing a rock vocal, right? But that's not very helpful, because at some point we need to narrow everything down to the small number of factors that really make a difference, that really matter for getting a rock vocal sound. And that's what I'm going to show you in today's video. This isn't a video about how to mix super creatively or do some crazy things out of left field. Instead, I'm just going to show you three fundamentals, the three rules for getting a great rock vocal mix every time. And these are the rules that you will want to implement and adhere to, I would say at least 95% of the time. It's that universal. So let's jump into the three rules. A quick caveat before we get started is I don't mention EQ and compression because I feel like, I talk about that all the time and I don't want to take away from these other topics that are also very important. But obviously compression and EQ is where it starts from in the mixing process. So if you want help with that, I'm going to just leave a free link below to my compression and EQ guide for vocals specifically. So check that out if you want help with EQ and compression. And then beyond that, we're going to look at the three things you need to implement, the three rules you need to follow once you've added good EQ and good compression to your vocal. All right, let's dive in. Rule number one for getting a rock vocal mix is never ever forget saturation. Saturation is critical. Now, to show you what I'm talking about here, if you've watched any of my past videos recently, you know exactly what song I'm going to use. This is a remake of the song Last Night by The Strokes. It sounds like this.
People, they don't understand. Your girlfriends, they can't understand.
And then it moves to this sound.
Last night, she said, oh baby, don't feel so down.
So again, we're talking about the core things, the core rules that you must implement for this type of sound. And again, number one is saturation. Usually I'll add this basically after the compression and after the EQ. So here's the lead vocal chain on this vocal specifically. So as you can see here, we've got, now this is a de-esser. It's just particular settings here in that compressor, de-esser, and then I've got my three-step compression system. Then I got some EQ. Again, if you want to learn all about that, just download the free guide below. And then after that is where we get into saturation and or distortion, because distortion, also has a very similar effect. So usually I'll use some combination of saturation and distortion plugins. So in this case, the first one I added is red light distortion. So this is a stock plugin inside of Studio One. So let me start with, let me turn off or turn on all the compression and EQ. So we'll start there, and that sounds like this.
I know this for sure. I'm walking out that door.
So we got a good compressed EQ'd vocal. Now listen to what happens when I add this distortion plugin.
Well, I've been in town for just about 15 minutes now. Baby, I feel so down, and I don't know why.
It just warms it up and it's beautiful. So I got the mix at like 25%. I went with the soft tube, just pretty basic stuff here. And again, it's just a stock plugin. So you probably have in your DAW a stock plugin that has a distortion that kind of sounds like that. Now after that is where we add saturation knob. So this is by Softtube. This is a free plugin. I just cranked this up to about 10 o'clock and called it good.
I keep walking for miles.
And obviously it raised the volume as well. And so I just put a mix tool, which is just a gain knob, and I turn down the volume. That way we have a bit more. That way as we walk through the chain, it doesn't get a massive increase in volume.
Down, and I don't know why.
But so those are the two main plugins when it comes to saturation and distortion. Notice what it sounds like without them.
I keep walking
like it's fine, but
for miles and see people.
You add that extra bit of like harshness, that bit of quality that cuts through the mix. And that is precisely what matters here. Because what genre are we talking about? Aggressive rock. When you have that hard aggressive rock sound, generally speaking, the mix is going to be very dense. It's going to be very thick and full with big guitars, big drums, everything's big. So if the entire instrumentation surrounding your vocal is big, if your vocal doesn't have a bit of that saturation and distortion, you're going to have a hard time cutting it through so that it can be heard. Because even though it is a dense mix, you still need the vocal to really cut through and drive the song. And so that is the power, that is the value of saturation, that is the purpose of saturation and distortion. It helps your vocal to really add that grit, and therefore it cuts through the mix. Now, One more thing that I did, I added just a third layer of saturation, and I used a bit of the color knob inside of this wonderful looking plugin, Sausage Fattener, which is only like, I think, $39. So it's a very cheap plugin, and I use this on every song. So this is one of those plugins that is just, has been worth every penny, and 10x, 100x, because I use it all the time. And this color knob is beautiful. So here's what it sounds like.
Out 15 minutes now, baby, I feel so.
It's pretty subtle. I didn't crank it much, but it adds, I just wanted a bit more high end, and that is what the color knob does there. So we have 3 layers. After the EQ and compression, we've got 3 layers of saturation and or distortion. We've got the red light distortion, again, a stock plugin. We've got soft tube saturation knob, a free plugin, and then a little bit of high-end color using Sausage Fattener.
Feel so down, and I don't know why I keep walking miles.
Rule number 2 for this aggressive rock vocal sound is you gotta use slap delay. Gotta have it. It's a non-negotiable. Again, this is a rule, but I'm not speaking 100% of the time, obviously, but I would say 95% of the time, if you want this type of rock vocal mix or this rock vocal sound, you gotta have it. You gotta have a little slap delay on it, and that is exactly what we have here. It's a very easy sound to achieve, so in this case, I'm using Valhalla Delay, and you can make this as mono or as stereo as you want to. So if you want it mono and just make it easy, you can turn the style down to just single instead of dual. But I have it in dual because I wanted to have it nice and wide, and I have the left and right slightly offset, 87 on the left, 115 milliseconds on the right. Feedback at 0. You can even experiment with turning this up slightly so that you get a little bit of a tail, but generally speaking, a slap back is just one slap back. And then I adjusted the width a little bit, played around with the drive, whatever other knobs that you might have inside of the plugin, you can play around with those as well. I adjusted the low and the high here. And so here is what it sounds like on that vocal.
Oh, I turn around. Oh, baby, don't care no more. I know this for sure. I'm walking out that door.
It sounds like it's in a room. It almost has a bathroom, just a very small room, and that is exactly what a slap delay does. So for the most part, most of the time I actually prefer the sound of a slap delay rather than a super short room reverb. So that's a little trick for you. If you're going for, you just want to add a little bit of a room, a little bit of an ambience to your vocal track, especially a rock vocal track, try using a slap delay instead of a short room reverb. And that's it. That is a slap delay. It's so important. Let's come back to this.
People, they don't understand.
There's without it.
Your girlfriend,
It gets nice.
They can't understand. Your grand.
That slap delay gives it that bit of life and that energy to give it its own space for the vocal to live in. And finally, rule number 3. Got to lean in for this one. This one's very important. It is, take a chill pill, my friend. Chill with the reverbs and delays. Now, this is very genre specific. I wouldn't be telling you this if this was a tutorial for psychedelic rock or for indie pop, or at least most of indie pop. We are talking about a very specific genre here in this type of aggressive indie rock. Because what did we talk about in rule number 1? These are dense mixes. Now, reverb, especially, let's focus on reverb here specifically. Reverb, by definition, it'll push whatever track you put reverb on, it pushes it farther back in the mix. So if you're trying to create a song that is super thick, super dense, guitars, drums, everything else, and your vocal has a bunch of reverb on it, it's not going to cut through the mix very well because, again, reverb pushes things back. It sort of blurs the sound a bit, and you end up with more of an opaque sort of warbly quality that meshes in with everything. That can be great for some genres and subgenres, but for this sound, usually not so much. So that is the thing I'll say, because now remember what we talked about in rule number 2, which was use a slap delay, generally speaking, instead of a short room reverb. Well, we used a slap delay on this song, but we didn't use any reverb, which is surprising, right? Because when you hear the vocal, it sounds like there's reverb on there. There's no reverb on this. That sound, that reverb sound, is coming from a bit of slap delay, and that's all you need. Because again, these are dense mixes, these are thick mixes. If you drench your vocal in a reverb or a bunch of delay, it takes away from that sort of raw, dig in, gritty, just record the thing and don't oversaturate it with, reverb and delay. So let me give you an example of what this might look like if we were to put too much reverb on a track like this. So I'm gonna grab a little plate here. Let's put the mix at like 60% or something. 4 seconds on the reverb. Okay, obviously you wouldn't do that, but maybe you would be tempted to do, this. Now again, it's fine, but this doesn't really fit, does it? It doesn't fit. Because reverb makes it feel more lost in the mix. It spreads it out. It kind of muddies the waters. But when you take the reverb off, walking out that door, you can hear it again. It's more crystallized. One more time. We do this again because of how dense these mixes are. It's almost by necessity. You can't really put a bunch of reverb on here because it's going to give too much of an opaque quality to it. And it's just not helpful the majority of the time. So that's a very simple thing, obviously. Same thing with delays too. Go simple. The only delay I have on this outside of the slap delay is a ping pong delay. I just went with the duck pong preset. I may have adjusted it slightly. So it's an 8th note ping pong, which means it just goes from the left to the right. But it's very subtle. Yeah, it's that one. And then it's very subtle. You don't really hear it, but it does add just a slight amount of movement to the overall vocal sound. But honestly, you could do without that delay track. That is not a part of the core elements that truly matter in this vocal mix. So, my friend, those are my 3 rules for getting an aggressive rock vocal mix. Now, as I mentioned at the onset of this video, I didn't talk about really EQ and compression, which is pretty foundational. And that's because I wanted to delve into the secondary components, what comes after compression and EQ, because everybody talks about compression and EQ. Now, just because I didn't talk about it though, doesn't mean it's not important, and that is why I still want to make sure that you are well equipped to make good and well-informed decisions with EQ and compression. And that is why I'm going to give you my free guide. It's the vocal EQ and compression guide. You can find it in the link in the description, and it's 100% free. I'll walk you through my 3-step compression system. I'll walk you through a visual guide for how to fix vocal EQ problems so that you're not making random moves and you actually know, okay, this is fixing this. I'm having a muddy problem, cut here. It's not cutting through the mix enough, boost here. Those types of things, and it's really going to help you out. So link is in the description. Again, it's 100% free. So I'm going to go ahead now and just play this remake from start to finish so that you can one more time just hear it and get a feel for especially how the saturation and distortions affect the vocal. So pay attention to that as you're listening to it, as well as the slap delay. And then notice how outside of the slap delay, you're not really hearing, excuse me, you're not really hearing reverbs and delays at all. So thank you so much for watching. I'm going to play this and say goodbye. I'm going to leave now. Until next time, see ya.